Before we dive in, just a housekeeping reminder for everyone in the audience. We would love to hear questions from you and bring you into the conversation. I'm going to kick off with a quick discussion with our amazing panelists, and then we will bring some roving mics to you. Jim, I want to kick off with you. Talk me through the transformation of Dow, an incredible Fortune 500 company, into what you describe as the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable materials company in the world. What does that mean in practice?
Well, the drive to be most innovative, I mean, we have a tremendous research and engineering background, and so how you put that to use is pretty important. Customer centricity is key. The demands are changing so rapidly for us that we have to be close not only to our immediate customer, we're typically a B2B company, but also with the end users and the brand owners' customers to understand the changes that are coming. So customer centricity and sustainability and innovation, all three go hand in hand. Almost everything that we're doing today for new product growth is driven by sustainability. And everything we're doing to transform our footprint to get scope 1 and 2 emissions to zero is the same. And then inclusion is just about creating the environment for people that allows us to attract and hire the best talent in, so that we have the workforce to do that, because the only way to have an innovative company is to have great people.
That's fantastic. And Jennifer, I want to turn to you. Now, you're really at the forefront of a number of practical applications of sustainable technologies. Can you share with us your vision for what many of us call the circular economy?
Well, simply put, we have a dream that someday everything you use in your daily lives will come from carbon that's already above ground. So that is the circular economy, that we no longer throw things away, and that instead we use them to make the next product and the next product.
And I understand you may have brought a prop with you, and I want to hear more about what you're carrying with you.
So this is, so let me just take 1 second to tell you what we do. So we take carbon emissions and we ferment them to ethanol, and then we use ethanol as an intermediate from which to make sustainable aviation fuel, polyester, polyethylene, et cetera. And an example of a commercial plant that we have is a steel mill in China that would normally emit carbon dioxide and particulate emissions. We take that, we just pump that into our bioreactor and we convert it to ethanol. That ethanol is then converted to the monomer that ends up being made into polyester. This is a Kraghopper's jacket that is under their CO2 Renew label. They have a whole line. And basically the polyester in this jacket was going to be pollution. And that is the circular economy. No pollution, products.
That's absolutely fabulous. And just so I get this right, this is actually into real world products happening already.
Yes, just go to the Kraghopper's website and type in CO2 Renew, and you can go to the REI website and just type LanzaTech, and you'll see polyester jackets, running pants, etc.
It's fabulous to hear that, we talk about these things as being so conceptual, and they're here and they're now, and you're making it happen. Thank you. Yeah. Jim, I'm going to turn back to you now. We've heard so much over the conversations over the last day or so. It feels like we're entering into a new political era. And especially when it comes to the green transition, we've seen a lot of successful projects, particularly from Dow and from LanzaTech, where you're working in different countries as different countries take a different view on the transition. Describe to me your experience in Canada, and how do you get that buy-in politically?
Yeah, we have a very interesting first mover project in Canada, which is to create the world's first net zero scope 1 and 2 ethylene and derivatives facility. And to give you an idea of the scale, we'll build a new 2 million ton ethylene facility next to an existing 1.5 million ton facility. We will fire the furnaces for those big transformative units from hydrogen, which is made from waste byproducts from our own process. So typically when you take natural gas liquid like ethane and you crack it, you get ethylene, which is the product we want to make plastics, maybe for plastic packaging, could be plastics for piping, whatever. And then we make hydrogen and methane. We'll take that hydrogen and methane waste product, convert that through a process technology that will convert it to pure hydrogen, and we'll use that pure hydrogen to fire the furnaces, making the whole thing a closed loop and no Scope 1 and 2 emissions. That'll be about 25% of our global ethylene and polyethylene capacity. Why is that important? Well, brand owners use our product they might use it for the packaging, they might use it in textiles, they might use it in any number of things. They might use it in the ingredients that go on the inside of the package, which has a big CO2 footprint for them. So if we can make those ethylene derivatives with zero Scope 1 and 2 emissions, we help them tremendously reduce their footprint, and that demand driver is still there. The other thing I'd mention is all industries that make basic materials, the products that we were just talking about, the project that I talked about, need a tremendous amount of energy. So we have to manage through that energy transition. So we talk about circular hydrogen or blue hydrogen in this case. We're looking at small modular nuclear reactors to be able to take an existing site and convert from combined cycle natural gas to power and steam from a small modular reactor, take the entire site to zero Scope 1 and 2 emissions. And those two things are very critical because they're 24/7 reliable power, steam, and energy for the transition. So that project I mentioned in Canada is there because we're close to our raw materials, which we need to be low cost. There are tax incentives for making that hydrogen investment, which is a little bit more expensive, but not prohibitively expensive. And then we also have access to a carbon capture pipeline that's in existence. So we have a place to sequester the CO2. And there are long-term policies to be able to support it with a price for carbon. They have a market price on carbon in Canada. That price signal is important to drive that next wave of investment. We moved to Canada first because they had those policies in place. A lot of that same policy is in the IRA, some from the infrastructure bill, some from the IRA that's here in the United States. And actually, some of the infrastructure that we need to be able to do those kind of investments here will be coming. It's under development now.
So it really sounds like you do need to have that leadership from political leaders and policymakers to start that. And Jennifer, on the partnership side of things, I mean, how have you found working with other organizations as a smaller player, and how has that dynamic played out?
Well, we have so many large partners and investors, and including we have a collaboration with Dow on making low carbon surfactants. I actually think that for a small company like ours, it's extremely important to partner with the large players because we don't have the domain knowledge that allows us to be successful, right? We don't want to reinvent everything. We just want to invent the piece that we're inventing. And so I find that these partnerships are super important in terms of giving us knowledge. But I would also say for all of you who are in large companies, please try to remember that IP is the only thing a small company has. And if your need for exclusivity or certain rights is what you've come in to talk about, then it's very difficult for a company like ours. A large company has many sources of revenue, and if the specific project doesn't move forward, that's fine. But for us, if a specific project doesn't move forward, it's life and death. So I think the relationship can work really well if everybody understands what the other partner needs. And we're very fortunate to have just fantastic partners.
Yeah, and so we've heard about that partnership element. Now, I have to talk about misinformation for a moment as well, because from where I'm sitting in Europe, where I'm based, we hear a lot about carbon capture.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people out there that are very skeptical about the technology. How do you win the hearts and minds of the skeptics?
You don't. You know what? I always like to say, whenever you have a new technology, it's almost like you're going to the ministry of no. Everything is no. There's always a reason why it doesn't work, and or why it can't work, or why it can't scale, or why people won't want it, or why it's not perfect. And the perfect being the enemy of the good is really the biggest thing we deal with. And it's tough for me to make those arguments and win those arguments. And so I think the success comes from allies. It comes from people like all of you sitting in this room who, whenever somebody says, well, the LanzaTech technology can't scale, you're the one that jumps in and says, well, but if it does scale, we'll reduce emissions and we'll displace fresh fossil carbon. So why don't we give it a chance? And so I need the allies. I need the people that lean in to help us be successful.
Yeah. And Jim, from the larger company perspective.
Yeah, I grew up in Missouri, so show me is the answer for us. I mean, you have to build it and you have to show people what it can do. And that requires taking some risk. Jennifer's right about IP. You've got to protect your own IP. I think that's one of the things that all of us around the world agree to, is you want to protect your technology.
Yeah.
But you also have to take some chances to get out there and make these things work. And to some extent, people believe what they want to believe, right? Until they've seen something different, until they've seen a future or they've seen an opportunity that they can't imagine.
Yeah.
And so I think the physical, like we get enamored with show and tell, the physical aspects are huge.
Fantastic. I'm going to break for questions from the audience in just a moment. But before we do, I think given the audience of people that we have in the room, what lessons would you both share to our audience of business and policy leaders on the green transition? What have you learned and what can you share as advice for going through that? And Jennifer, I'll start with you.
Well, I think the biggest thing in terms of policy is we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We fall in love with these beautiful ideas that are going to be silver bullets. And sometimes those silver bullets prevent progress. And, are we going to have hydrogen steel? Yes. When are we going to have it? Not for a while. So why not just capture steel emissions today? And so what tends to happen is we slow ourselves down. These are calls to inaction. What we really need is people to agree. Small bits of progress is better than dreaming of the unicorn that's going to show up in 2035.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think in the U.S. On energy, we've often talked about our energy policy as an all of the above policy. But all of the above and focused on being a leader in those technologies, focused on being low cost in those technologies. And one of the things that Jennifer mentioned, in the pursuit of the perfect, we sometimes forget how expensive it is. So that project I talked about in Canada, which we will make 3 million tons, 3.5 million tons of capacity with zero scope 1 and 2 emissions, that's going to be about $1 billion that we need. It'll be the largest hydrogen project that's ever FID'd. If I was to do that with green hydrogen, I would need 7 gigawatts of electricity and all the electrolyzers to make the green hydrogen. It wouldn't be $1 billion more expensive. So for me to do it at a price where a brand owner can say, I can convert my product line, means I can't wait for green hydrogen. I have to move now and make that transition now.
Fantastic. If you could raise your hand in the audience if we have any questions. I can't see anyone. We have one at the front if you've got a mic. Thank you. If you could say your name and company, that'd be fantastic.
Stanley Jeffs. I'm the founder and president of Women in the World, Sustainability Women in the World. I know Jennifer, thank you for all your leadership. My question is, congratulations on moving us from linear to circular model, and every innovation in that transition is critically important. In the era of the world needing more collaboration and partnership. We are moving to looking at advanced recycling, chemical recycling in context of taking, truly circular direction in terms of getting the consumer waste as an input, waste as an input, and then, creating that bigger circle. So 2 questions. Are you collaborating with other chemical companies like Eastman, DuPont and BASF who are looking at that? So that's one question. Second question is, we've seen like new shiny things. RenewCell, the world's biggest fiber-to-fiber recycling, 60,000 tons a year, went through truly crisis and chaos. They're back on their feet and on their way to make an impact again. But is LanzaTech another shiny thing? How do you maintain this momentum? Thank you.
Okay.
You go first.
Well, on circularity, I would say a huge opportunity. All the companies are working, some together and some in competition, on all forms of technologies. We have a target to have 3 million metric tons of recycled materials. I think the biggest thing is getting the high quality materials back in. So one of the biggest limiting steps on our ability to recycle is getting that waste. We don't want it to go to landfill. We'd rather have it sorted out and brought back to the entry point for feedstocks.
On the issue of are we the next shiny object, that's a great question. One comment I would make is I think what we have done as a company is shown that gas fermentation works and scales. We have 6 commercially operating plants. And what I'm starting to see is a bunch of other companies doing gas fermentation. So I would say gas fermentation is becoming a thing. And I think we've enabled that. And is it a shiny object? If there is something better that can do the things we do, I'm all for it. I think the competition is really climate change and not companies versus other companies. So I welcome being obsoleted.
Right. Thank you so much for your fabulous questions. I'm so sorry. I think we are completely tight on time. I wish we could get more questions in. I want to say a huge thank you to both Jim and Jennifer for being fantastic.
Thank you.